I probably would give it a solid B-plus grade at this point. I think the second day was the slam dunk of the draft. I mean, getting George Pickens, a potential number one receiver, at 52 is great. I thought DeMarvin Leal was the player I had rated as a top 50 pick and could be a future start on the defensive line. I think that really bumps up the grade for me. Obviously, what it's ultimately going to come down to is, Kenny Pickett. And I think seeing the other quarterbacks fall down the draft, maybe you don't feel quite as good about the value. But, hey, the Steelers drafted their guy, and I think with those first three picks, it's a pretty solid draft. And even beyond that, I mean, I think Calvin Austin III, the receiver from Memphis, was good value. He could have been a top 100 pick, and they cleaned up later in the draft too. So overall, I think you're going to find some impact players here. But history is going to look back. It's going to be about what Kenny Pickett did and what his impact was for the Steelers.
I mean, that really is it, isn't it? Oh, Shane. I mean, when you think about it, if Kenny Pickett doesn't get it done or is just sort of average, it almost doesn't matter what the rest of the class does in a lot of the eyes of a lot of people.
Yeah, you could have two other all-pro players from this draft, but if you whiffed on the quarterback at 20 overall, no one's going to care too much. So you really need him to be a franchise quarterback that can compete in an AFC now, with Patrick Mahomes and with Russell Wilson and with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. That's going to be the big question. Can he do it? And, I had him as my fourth-rated quarterback in the class. I think after finding out more after the draft on guys like Matt Corral and some of the off-field issues, I understand why you feel a lot better about Kenny Pickett as a leader, as a quarterback that can lead your team more than a couple of those players. But I still, wonder, does he have the physical attributes? Can he develop a little bit more? And if the staff can do that and he can turn into a franchise quarterback, then, yeah, this draft will look great.
There's no question about it. What in your mind is going to be the most important or critical thing for him to do to improve from college to the NFL so that he becomes the quarterback they think he can be?
I think the biggest things is throwing, to the middle of the field and working on the technique from a footwork perspective so that he can drive the ball accurately when in the pocket. I think that's the biggest thing for this entire quarterback class. The footwork is just a mess. Kenny Pickett on the move, throwing on the run, and we saw some incredible passes against Clemson this past year. He is so good at doing that. It's almost similar to young Ben in terms of moving around, almost worked to his advantage. I think Kenny Pickett's like that too, but you got to make the passes when you have a cleaner pocket, when you're not just moving around. You can't, under pressure, start just moving and get out of there. You got to stand in and deliver good passes to the middle of the field accurately. I think he struggled with that at times this season. So you can clean up that footwork, let him use his feet to drive the football, get it there quickly, get it out in front of the receiver. That's going to help. If he can't do that, NFL defenses are going to be able to feast on him, and that is the one problem if he can't advance in that area.
Well, enough about him. Obviously, we're going to talk a lot about him over the next 4 or 5 years. George Pickens, there were some concerns, some anonymous GMs or coaches who said there were some concerns about him off the football field. I don't know. The guy looks to me like he has a chance to be a star.
He absolutely does. In terms of pure talent, he is a top 5 receiver in this draft, especially if you go back and watch him as an 18-year-old at Georgia in the SEC. He's dominating these future first-round picks at corner, so this guy's going to be really good. But I think the injury this past season, he came back from it. Everything seems fine. I think that was a question. Just didn't get to see him play a lot this year. And when he did, they didn't throw the ball to him too much. And the effort concerns do show up. If you go back to 2 years ago, there's a play that sticks out for me against Cincinnati in the bowl game where he was the only option. It was in the red zone. They were throwing him a fade, and he just didn't even run the route. He just stopped at the line. He kind of gave up when he got jammed, and they just threw the ball up, and there's no one there. I think there are those things cropping up. Is it a big deal? I don't think it's that big of a deal. If you have a player who doesn't give full effort on the field, that's where the coaching staff comes in. That's where the locker room comes in. The Steelers usually are good about that. If you can bring him along, the talent is there for him to be one of the best to be the best receiver that we've seen since Antonio Brown on this team.
Well, there's no question. There was some question about DeMarvin Leal not really filling the exact need the Steelers have on their defensive line. That he's not necessarily, a sort of a plug-and-play run-stopper type guy. What is your thoughts on him?
I think that is the concern, and maybe why he fell to the third round was teams just weren't sure where to fit him. He's kind of a tweener where he's not quite a 5-tech that can stop the run and set that edge like the Steelers usually have in Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt. But I think the 4-3 teams were, he's 283, maybe a little bit too big to be in that 3 technique spot. But when you watch him play, I mean, once again, one thing the Steelers did in this second day is draft guys that as freshmen, 18, 19 years old, were doing really well in the SEC. Leal was doing that game in, game out. He was a big reason why Texas A&M beat Alabama this year. He was doing well against the run and getting a pass rush against Bryce Young, forcing him out of the pocket and eliminating half the field. I think he has some of that pass rush ability off the end. If you can bulk him up maybe a little bit so he gets a little more stout against the run, I think there is some big upside. Like I said, I haven't graded his top 50 pick just for the consistency and upside that he has. I think there's a lot to like about getting him at 84. And it sounds like the Steelers are pretty surprised to get him where they did.
Couple other ones to ask. People are really excited, obviously, about Calvin Austin. It looks like he can do a lot of different things. Connor Haywood, the thing I would ask about him is, why do you get him when you already have, the other Watt, Derek Watt? And then, and of course, the quarterback at the end is a little bit of a mystery, I think, the most.
Yeah, the Hayward pick definitely left me scratching my head a little bit. It just didn't seem like a major need to me to play him at fullback ultimately. And it sounds like that's what they're going to do. I think there were some good things this season, especially late in the season, of using him out of the backfield as kind of an H-back, lining him up at tight end. He is a versatile player who's played running back, fullback, tight end. He's lined up all over the field. So maybe you're hoping that the offense can get a little bit creative and you can utilize him in a different way. I just doubt we really see Connor Hayward that much, to be honest with you, even if he does win that job, quote unquote. I don't think they're going to use him that much. The Chris Oladukin pick from South Dakota State, my I don't know, conspiracy theory, I guess, is they drafted him to essentially be Lamar Jackson on the scout team because he has that type of athletic ability and that movement skill. He's definitely not an NFL passer by any means, though he was pretty productive there for South Dakota State. I don't think his arm's going to translate. But you have, a high upside athlete that you can put on the scout team. You can use some of these athletic now running quarterbacks and get a feel for your defense of what that looks like. I think that could be an important thing to have on the practice squad or have as your fourth quarterback on a team.
Right. That's the interesting thing is you got to add some arms. Shane, everybody seems to be excited about the Ravens draft. Why is that?
I think everyone, myself included, just had a lot of these players ranked higher than where the Ravens took them because as they do and as the Steelers have done in the past, just taking good football players, regardless of position, is generally going to be viewed favorably. Kyle Hamilton was my number 3 rated player in this draft. They got him at 14. Tyler Linderbaum, the center from Iowa, I had as a top 20 player. They got him at 25. Travis Jones, they got in the third round. I thought could have been a late first-round pick. So when you keep putting that together, they're just stacking good football players, and that fit what the Ravens do. So I think that's why people like this draft. It's not flashy. There's no big receiver. There's no big quarterback or corner. But you're building the trenches, building the pass rush, building a safety position that can make an impact, even if it's not the high-profile positions.
Overall, I think they did a good job. But who in the hell is Lamar Jackson going to throw the ball to?
I guess that's the question now. Trading away Marquise Brown, who's going to Arizona, who just had their top receiver suspended. I imagine Rashad Bateman, the first-round pick last year, I think is much better than he kind of showed last year. And then it's going to be a lot of passes to Mark Andrews, the tight end. I think that's going to be the thing. And they're going to run the ball a lot. I think J.K. Dobbins will be back. So you better be able to stop the run. And I think if you can do that and have a good corner to shut down Bateman and have someone play on Andrews, I think he can do well against the Ravens still.
think there was something like 27 or 28 receivers taken in this draft. We talked about how deep it was, to start at that position. But are you surprised by even that number, though?
I am a little bit surprised by that number. I'm a little surprised that teams were kind of taking these shots late in the draft on some of these receivers who I think were a lot more like flash and upside, but never really showed it on film. It seemed like on the third day, teams were just drafting receivers to try to build on this depth. And I think a lot of the 6th, 7th rounders might flame out a little bit, but it's high. You could just see more teams want more weapons. They want more players. And a lot of these receivers, too, play special teams. I think that helped a lot of them get drafted.
Well, yeah, there's no question about that. The flip side is I know that you had talked when we were on, when I had you on maybe two or 3 weeks ago, before the draft, you talked about the fact that you thought maybe some of these quarterbacks were a little overrated in terms of where people had them going. Are you surprised that, really the top 5 guys weren't off the board until Sam Howell, I think in the 5th or 6th round?
I definitely was surprised. I thought people were overrating the quarterbacks, pushing Malik Willis to number 2 and saying there'd be 4 in the first round. I thought that was BS. But to get Sam Howell in the 5th, I would not have expected that at all to happen for a player who, once again, is a freshman, did really well in the ACC, had some good moments with no weapons this year, put the team on his back and kept trying, kept plugging away. That was surprising to me, even to see Desmond Ridder and Malik Willis and Matt Corral fall to the mid to late 3rd round was surprising. But I think a lot of teams knew these quarterbacks probably aren't franchise guys. So why are we going to spend a high pick? And then you're stuck with them. You're saddled to them. Even if they don't show anything, you can't really move on. Whereas next year, 2023, looks like a much better quarterback class. And if you're in position to take one, you're going to take a good one. Why waste a pick on a guy that you might be replacing in a year anyway?
Well, the other thing I wanted to ask was what were your thoughts on what New England was doing?
I'm always skeptical, I guess, to criticize a Bill Belichick draft because he usually bites me, but I don't know what they were doing. I don't quite understand. Their first round pick in Cole Strange, I liked him. I thought he probably would have. I had him in the top 100. I thought he was going to be a 2nd or early 3rd round pick, but to take a guard from Chattanooga who early in Senior Bowl week just got dominated by guys that were like 6th round picks in this draft, to me is just a little bit overvalued. You're really going to have to bring him a long way. And then Bill Belichick really has not been good at drafting receivers. So the pick at 50 of Tyquan Thornton from Baylor, he runs a 4.2, but that's about it. That's about all he can do. I think that's going to be the pick they look at and see George Pickens taking 2 picks later. That's not going to look good in a couple years.
Yeah, I didn't understand that. I didn't understand why they took a guy. Obviously he ran well and everything else, but it was pretty clear there were other guys that were up there that were, that were ranked higher. And then they took Bailey Zappi or whatever his name is from Western Kentucky. I'm looking at their draft and I'm like, is Bill Belichick really just trying to show that he's smarter than everybody else by taking a bunch of guys, that nobody else would have taken in the position that they were taken?
I think it could be. I think there's a piece that when you go back and look at these Patriots drafts, they're not all that great. Like I said, the receiver position usually doesn't come out well. He hits on a couple late rounders every now and then that do much, much better. But that team is thin. It's not a good roster. And honestly, it's his coaching is great, but I don't think he is the talent evaluator that everyone maybe thought that Bill Belichick was. And if this draft fails, and the Patriots fail a little bit, I think there's going to be some cries there that, hey, maybe it's too old, maybe it's time to move on.
There's no question. Well, Shane, I know you're really busy and you're wrapping everything up. So for the draft, so I'll let you go, but I appreciate you doing it, and hopefully we can do it again throughout the summer.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks for having me on this draft season. And, I appreciate it. We're only 359 days until the 2023 draft.